Is God a copycat? There is little doubt in the mind of historians that the early Abrahamic faith borrowed much of its ideas and practices from Egyptian culture. For example, Egyptian temples were seen as houses for the gods. Egyptians would bring offerings to these gods in the same way the Israelites would later bring offerings to their god. These Egyptians were also forbidden to enter the temple's most sacred areas, the Holy of Holies, just as we read in the Bible. Some of these ancient Egyptian temples still exist to this day, among many other fascinating relics, such as an ark. Yes, very similar to the Ark of the Covenant described in the Bible. They even carried it on poles, just like the Israelites had. The depiction of angelic beings mounting the ark are also very similar to Egyptian concepts. Such relics can be found in museums today, including on Tutankhamun's shrine and on top of King Tut's tomb. Only these Egyptian practices and relics predated the Abrahamic traditions. The Israelites copied. And this should not be so surprising. Moses, the great leader of the Israelites, who it is claimed to have written the first 5 books of the Bible, was an Egyptian, and a high-ranking one. Very educated and intelligent, no doubt. However, not so surprising, Moses would offer little originality. You see, the Egyptians had even pioneered the concept of a monotheistic god under the rule of a pharaoh named Akhenaten. Akhenaten first introduced this idea of a single, preeminent god and claimed to be the mouthpiece for this one true creator. Moses seems to have followed suit. He was most certainly influenced by such narratives. Akhenaten had also sent workers out to remove all images and names of previously worshipped gods. This might remind Christians today of the words of Moses when he writes, "Make unto thee no graven images," or that God is a jealous God. Through monotheism, a one-God theology, all sacrifices, offerings, and tithings were consolidated. All profit suddenly diverted to Akhenaten and his family, removing the status of all other priests and temples. Moses would have understood the unity of a priesthood and profitability gained by a one-God concept, and even demanded that his family, the Levites, would be the only priestly tribe out of the 12 tribes of Israel. They would write the laws, such as the book of Leviticus, meaning Levites, and would become increasingly wealthy as all prophets, 10% of every Israelite, the best foods and wines the land had to offer, gems and alloys, all went into the hands of the priests. The Egyptians had been writing down laws on stone slabs, and of course, so did the God of Moses. The correlations could go much deeper, but I want to turn focus here. Messages on stone? So the creator of this universe has his messages written on stone slabs? Really? Something seems odd here, doesn't it? Let's just be real for a moment. You're telling me God, the being who created bumblebees, is a copycat? A God who created jellyfish and elephants carves his words onto stones? A God who desires to speak to humans and provide us with laws, but uses the exact same methods used by all the previous gods that are not real? Is this not extremely fishy to anybody? This is just crazy for me to imagine how this would be true. It seems more likely that this God is not real either, right? The exact same methods, and men are his mouthpiece? Can any logical person not help but be skeptical? If a real God, the creator of this universe, wanted people to know him, he could certainly do better than arcs, temples, stone, and magical tales written in books by men. Furthermore, not only are these books filled with outlandish magical tales, but contain prophecies that never, ever come true. They really don't. None of them. They never do. All Bible prophecies fail. What happens is that each new generation reinterprets the older failed ones and twists them into newer and evolving narratives. Or they just remain unfulfilled, and people are still waiting. Thousands upon thousands of years will pass, and believers will wait, and they wait. What's interesting is how every generation thinks that they are the ones living in the time of fulfillment. That Jesus will soon descend from a cloud, or a golden holy city will drop down onto Jerusalem. Some of you might be wondering if this is a joke. No, it is not. People are really buying this stuff. In fact, they are still buying into an ancient blood sacrifice ritual for forgiveness. These Bronze Age ideas are still believed in the 21st century by masses. A blood sacrifice ritual was a common practice by nearly every ancient culture. This idea is certainly not unique or original to Jesus. Again, the creator of this universe shockingly offers little originality. Here today in the 21st century, believers claim to have authentic and endearing relations with this God. Yet these relations appear to be no more valid than that of an imaginary friend. These prayers and feelings of endearment are a one-sided relationship. Nobody is on the other end of the line. Literally. It's like the entire relationship is pretend. They likely will not admit this fact and fail to recognize how there's something terribly unconvincing about all of this silent and invisible God business buzzing in their lives. Regardless, I have been told by some believers that because God is elusive, evidence is scanty, that I must choose to believe, and that this is why God seems to be in hiding. They will admit to the imaginary aspect of this spirituality, and use this instead to indicate it is some sort of spiritual test. And then there are others who will also admit that the evidence for Christianity is not really tangible. Science or history cannot prove its credibility reliably. So I must rely on some sort of spiritual experience or feelings. In fact, they will say, I have a spiritual obligation to believe in a God-man born of a virgin who floated up into the clouds. I must make this choice and choose to believe in a blood sacrifice. That it works, somehow. And if I don't choose to believe this, I will be cast into hell. This God's love is not unconditional love. It is conditional love. If I fail to meet these conditions, I will be rejected. I would argue this is borderline insanity on nearly every level of cognitive reasoning. And might I add, a bit demented. Can you imagine the God that created all life on earth, that created humans, will cast them into hell for not believing in him correctly? or being skeptical? The fact that so many people believe this makes me feel slightly embarrassed for humanity. I once believed this, and I am embarrassed to admit it. Mind you, we are talking about the highest intelligent being there possibly could be. I can't help but wonder, if he's going to write onto stone, couldn't he have written his message into a rock mountain that would at least survive for thousands of years, in which we all could look onto throughout every age? He's God. I mean, come on, right? Couldn't he have made a tree that spells out his words in the bark, or at least his name, so that even thousands of years later his identity would be undeniable? It seems overwhelmingly obvious if there is a God likened to the concept of an Abrahamic God, some kind of all-powerful creator entity, he clearly does not wish to be known or identified. If he did, why would he be a copycat or rely solely on man? We are talking about the same God who created frogs. Certainly he could do better, right? It seems far more likely that our concept of what God is simply does not exist. And our religious concepts, traditions, and relics only help to prove this beyond measure. If there is a creator who created humpback whales, he is far beyond being recognized or defined by any of us. It would be like an ant trying to describe a Honda Accord. It simply can't even be fathomed. However, we are smart enough to recognize a scam. If such a God truly wanted to reach out to me, I should be extremely skeptical if it relied exclusively on other men or women. Is God not capable of being his own messenger? The fact of the matter is this: every God ever conceived by man, yes, even the Abrahamic God, is a paper God. This is just a fact. You can only find him in a book. This presents a real problem. A real God would not need Moses or Akhenaten. A real God wouldn't need our money. In every perceivable way, this God appears not to be real. Not only are the stories outlandishly unbelievable and lacking evidence, but the relationship with this God appears 100% imaginary. It is completely one-sided. Nobody on the other end. Anybody who claims otherwise, seems to me, is only fooling themselves and others. Stay strong and wise, my friends.
I don't believe in masquerades. I don't believe that you're okay. I don't believe that God will save. Only you can solve your problems. I don't care what they sold.